Hi everybody, welcome to Camcycle's Combined Authority Mayoral Election Hustings. Thank you so much for joining us, especially when we've had a bit of a holiday and we're allowed out and the sun has been shining at the same time as it's been snowing, but doesn't matter. Really do appreciate that you've all made it to join us this evening. We're still doing clearly online hustings, so bear with us as we have any sort of technical issues or glitches, but rest assured we are live tweeting, we're looking at your comments on Facebook, and if you're having any problems accessing this, send us a message or an email and we'll make it work for you. So now I would like to introduce the candidates that we have at our hustings. I'll just point out that you may see Anna. Anna's not a candidate, but Anna is my colleague. So I'm Roxanne DeBow, the Executive Director of Camcycle. Anna is our Communications and Community Officer, and she's helping with the social media while we do this tonight. So thank you, Anna. Now that we know who is not candidates, let me introduce the candidates that we do have. So we have Dr Nik Johnson for the Labour and Co-operative Party. Hi, Nick.
Hello there. Hello, everybody.
And we have Councillor Aidan van der Weyer for the Liberal Democrats. Hi, Aidan.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you.
And we've already had some comments that we may be missing a candidate. Yes, we are. Mayor James Palmer was unable to join us this evening. I will reassure all those who are watching that we went above and beyond and did everything that we could to contact James Palmer and tried to get him to attend. However, we were told last week that he would not be attending. So he has said that he will answer policy questions that we put to him in writing. So I do hope he will respond to our mayoral survey, which will be going out to both our other candidates in the coming days. So watch that space. You're in for something with that one. So I think that I've spoken enough. We will now give both of our candidates an opportunity to introduce themselves, tell us a bit about what they are about. But for the most part, this hustings is for you, the people who are watching. So please send your questions through in the chat and we'll do everything we can to get them asked for you this evening. Now, I'm just going in the order I see people on the screen. So that means that first up for an introduction will be you, Nick. Over to you.
Thank you, Roxanne, and thank you for everybody who's taken the time in their evening to tune in. Right. So my name's Dr Nik Johnson. I'm the Labour and Co-operative Party candidate for the mayoral election. I am a middle-aged man, but I am not a mammo. But that doesn't mean to say I don't recognise the importance of cycling. And during the course of tonight, you'll probably hear me say three things over and over again, because that's my campaign's based on the 3 C's: compassion, cooperation, and the sense of building community. I want to do politics very differently, and I want to work with organisations like Camcycle to deliver things like community in both Cambridgeshire and indeed Peterborough. I'm currently based in Huntingdon, work at the Hinchinbrook Hospital as a children's doctor, but I myself live in a more rural location and understand the difficulties that transport trying a young family around the region, and how we have challenges about safe cycling in the those sorts of areas. I guess I should say, after the 3 C's of compassion, cooperation, community, I guess the 4th C could be about cycling, but I'm not going to try and curry your favour that much. Really, it's more about change, and it's about looking at things very differently. Everything has changed, though. Post-COVID, we have to look at things very differently. And although we've come through a terrible time as a country, and we've lost people along the way, and we've seen some terrible things in the job that I do, there were things that came out over the last year that maybe made us think the way we should approach how we build our communities, how we live our lives in a different way. And cycling was one of those things. I'm not here to sort of big up the other side, but in terms of one thing I will acknowledge that the government did do in making sure that bicycle repair shops and bicycle shops were kept open. I thought that was a masterstroke, and indeed very important to make sure that people embrace the lifestyle that can be enjoyed with using cycle, not just on a day-to-day basis, but in terms of kind of using in their leisure time. So I've talked about the 3 C's, I've talked about the 4th C of change, but really all I'm going to say is the thing that marks me out as a different candidate is I'm coming to this with an idea that I want to see public health making a much bigger point of all public policy. Perhaps it's maybe not that unusual. As a doctor, I'm going to advocate for public health, but I can see the benefits about a green economy, the idea of using cycling as part of the way that we come through the post-COVID recovery, the idea of improved health, the idea of building green spaces, safe streets, school streets that are safe, making sure that we can commute and use the bicycle and cycle routes as a much more effective part of our day-to-day lives. I've just been given a thumbs up there, which I think is my time up, but thank you for that's basically where I'm coming from. 3 C's, a 4th C of change, and then public health.
Thank you very much, Nick. Great keeping to time. So I'll hand over to Aidan for his introduction.
Yep, thank you very much, Roxanne. That's very pleased to be here. Cycling has always been my favourite mode of transport. As a child growing up in rural Huntingdonshire, it gave me and my friends an amazing autonomy. And then cycling in London when I was a student in the 90s was rather more exciting, but it did give you a better sense of the city. And then I moved back to Cambridge 15 years ago, and that was a very easy choice, knowing that cycling was a welcomed and normal part of daily life. And now my own children love getting about by bike, including using the cycle paths on the A10 corridor that I campaigned for. In fact, I joined Camcycle and the A10 corridor cycling campaign well before I became a local councillor. In part, it was seeing what you were able to achieve through campaigning, lobbying and scrutiny that helped me decide to stand for election in 2013. And it is and being able to support cycling since the Lib Dems took over South Cambs District Council in 2018 has been really important to me. Because cycling and active travel more generally is a crucial part in the transformation in transport that we need for a whole host of reasons. Despite Cambridge having the highest cycling rate in the country, and South Cambs, proud to say, having the highest rate for a rural area, the transport system just doesn't work for people across the county. In rural areas, public transport very scarce, and in towns and cities, clogged with cars at all times of the day, and more this year. These failures affect people's lives in so many different ways: hours sitting in cars, bad air quality, damage to communities, poor public spaces, isolation for those not able to drive, plus the harm to the environment and the economy. And I don't believe that there is a realistic solution to these problems that does not involve more people cycling and walking. And to do that means investing in good quality infrastructure that makes cycling attractive for people of all ages, that creates networks and deals with these barriers. And it isn't just about the city. The demand for better cycling exists in every town and village across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. The experience of last year's lockdown has really brought home just how good it can be if you have a pleasant place to walk and cycle, and just how bad it can be when the cars come back. So I think we've got a real opportunity now that we need to take advantage of. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for both of your introductions, and I will let you know that we are edging our way up to 50 attendees already. So the eyes are on. Excellent. Well, I'm going to kick off with the first question, something to warm things up, and perhaps ask you both for just a bit of your personal experience with cycling. So just tell us a bit about what it's been like for you getting out on the bike or the trike or whatever it is, and we'll go the other way this time. So I'll start with you, Aidan.
Yeah, thank you. So I said a little bit of that, but I've never been a particularly keen sports cyclist. I've probably never cycled more than 40 miles in a single go. I mean, I really appreciate the health benefits when I cycle a lot. I really feel really feel it and the positive aspects of it, but it's mainly about being able to get around in a really pleasant way, a sort of human way of getting around that doesn't have impacts on people as you cycle through a place compared with a car, on the environment, and it gives you sort of a freedom that you just don't get with any other way of getting about.
Thank you, and over to you, Nick.
Well, I'm the sort of bloke who recognises the benefits of cycling, and every time I ever go on a bike, I think I should do this more often. But then I should say I should go to the gym a lot more often. In my experience, I've lived in big cities like London, and I used to bike a lot there. Recognise the dangers and the challenges, and sometimes, in all honesty, I didn't get on the bike because I was scared or the bad weather. But I also was somebody who recognises outside of the day-to-day commuting benefits. When I used to go between sort of Hammersmith and Kingston Park, I used to have the most wonderful commute where I would go between. I could see deer in the park, and it was fantastic. And I lost a lot of weight then. But it was at a later stage. I've done things like I've done the cross coast to coast, the St. Bede's to Robin Hood's Bay. I'd love to do that again, but I just don't think I'm up to it. And those things I recognise the joy that cycling can bring, but I think it's almost like I'm the project here, where I want to kind of, in the same way, hopefully bring cycling to every area of Cambridgeshire. We're talking about Peterborough, we're talking about the rural areas of Wisbech and March, sort of rural poverty, and some of the answers that cycling can give. Maybe if it can convince me, I can convince a few others. So maybe I'm the work in progress that needs to be done.
Excellent, thank you. Now, I'll point out that Camcycle, while we've started as Cambridge Cycling Campaign, more and more our work has been reaching out well into the region, I guess almost right out to the combined authority area. And it's really great to see we've got some questions coming in that are about that region, so well beyond Cambridge City. So perhaps again, I'll keep this one general before we start getting to some quite specific questions. But I'd be quite interested to hear your views on how should we connect the region either to Cambridge or to other areas of the region. So we're talking village to village or rural cycle routes and connecting into the city. So let's start off by setting the scene that this is about more than Cambridge City. And this time we'll go Nick and then Aidan.
Thank you, Roxanne. Just as a point of clarity, do you mean improved cycling connectivity, specifically with cycling, or actually the answers around trying to improve rural transport as a whole?
Well, I think that actually these things connect with each other. So sometimes you need the other transport networks to connect to cycling, or cycling enables those transport networks. So I've given you a hint there, but I'm very happy to take a
absolutely. I just wanted to clarify. So you've obviously heard I'm big on the 3 C's. Well, my next 3 is it's going to have to bear with me. Buses, buses, buses. I've already made a big plan that I can see predicted or from other candidates and the current mayor talking about huge scale expenditure around a Cam Metro. I've already said that that needs to be brought to a halt, and I would like to focus on the idea of linking rural areas with a much enhanced in-house, taking basically buses back into this situation that you have in London, go away from deregulation, make them regulated, and that basically emulate what Andy Burnham's now been given permission to do in Greater Manchester. In the same way they have Transport for London, Transport for Manchester, Transport for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. But we're not here to talk about, I think that will be an important part and probably where I'll put my immediate focus. But the reason I say that is because I think it's particularly relevant to what we've seen about the benefits in terms of the guided bus route. And the guided bus route, which alongside it has this wonderful corridor for cycling and for walking and for horses. I was looking at some of the evidence saying how where those towns that are on the bus route are connected, they have much more representation about people using bicycles. So for instance, compare Bar Hill, 3% usage, people commuting on a bike, but it's almost double in areas like Swavesey. And I can see a real benefit where if you create, use innovative things like the bus route, I would like to see a more definitive bus route turning right at St Ives and then going up towards a big transport hub, particularly in the sort of Chatteris, March area, linking in particularly around the rail, enhanced rail services, linked to Wisbech on the rail. But at all times where we move forward, when we talk about improved rail connections, improved sort of possibly like railway networks around Cambridge, but particularly around those buses, making sure that whatever infrastructure we put in, we put cycle routes, cycle kind of storage facilities meaningful in large numbers, and focusing on that as part of any transport plan going forward.
Over to you, Aidan.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so that you get the real benefits from investment in cycling infrastructure, in particular, through creating networks, and when you're in a sort of rural area, you might make some investments, but they're often isolated. So I think one of the crucial things that someone in a strategic role like the mayor has is to make create an overall plan so we know where we're going, we know where the problems are, and we can sort of work towards solving them and creating that network which will really enable people to just have many more people to cycle as their sort of default mode of transport, without having to think too hard about whether they're going to be able to do all the journeys that they need to do. I've seen some smaller examples of that in rural areas. I mentioned the A10 routes that are starting to link up places and are getting very well used as people understand the journeys that they can make. And the Greenways project from the Greater Cambridge Partnership is very ambitious. It's great, the investment there, and it's creating a lot of excitement. It is also creating a lot of expectations beyond Cambridge. People saying that the villages immediately around Cambridge are getting good cycle routes. So why can't we? Why is everything focused on Cambridge? I think that's got to be the next stage, as we do see the demand that there is, and the increases in usage in things like the Greenways, so we can create those networks. I mean, it is difficult. We've had some cases in these sort of temporary experimental schemes where that have been quite hard to convince people of the benefits of, because the scope to create good quality cycle routes is quite limited in many rural areas, but the benefits are huge, and the demand is there. I'm quite convinced of it.
Excellent. Right, I'm going to go on to some of the specific questions that we have coming through now. So we shall start with a question from Kimberly, who says that she lives in Brampton and throughout lockdown wanted to go for local walks. However, perhaps better walking routes are needed near the Brampton Park development. Now, you might not know specifically about this area, but if you do, fabulous, please answer about that. But perhaps we should say more generally, how do you think that the mayor and the combined authority should work to ensure that new developments or even existing developments have really good walking infrastructure and walking links? And why do you think we should have that? I'll start with you, Aidan.
Yes, it is absolutely crucial that we improve the quality of cycling and walking within developments, and also the links outside them from the start. I mean, we have starting to get some good examples in and around Northstowe and some of the fringe developments around Cambridge. They're not always done as well as we would want them, but the ambition is there, and the thinking is there, and the expectation is there, and it is vital for new developments in particular that is these sort of decent quality cycling and walking routes are put in from the start, so that people don't immediately start sort of driving cars. I mean, that's the real issue as people move into places. If they get used to realise that there are good routes around, they will be much more inclined to use their cars less. And that builds creates momentum, creates sort of expectations, and changes cultures a bit. But that planning has to be there, and I think that there is a real problem with standards, both in the design and the implementation. I think the mayor has a particular role there, in getting standards agreed across the whole area. Obviously, there's 6 planning authorities in the combined authority area, so it can be a little bit disjointed and inconsistent between areas. And these things do have a cost. So again, if we have agreed standards, then there's less of an incentive for developers to cut corners on that.
Over to you, Nick.
Well, I do actually know the development being talked about, and I can see, just on a personal level, there's a bit of a frustration. You're not a million miles away from the great ooze, but if you feel that you've moved into a lovely house, and then the accessibility of that wonderful part of the Cambridgeshire countryside isn't as easily available to you because you're walking around more concreted over areas. I mean, and I think in some things, look, let's be clear about it. I think Aidan and myself are going to agree. There does need to be a kind of wholehearted approach to looking at standards that developers work towards, and that goes back to maybe the 3 C's again. If as a mayoral lead, I can work with the leaders of all the county council, the district councils, and talk about, well, look, how are we going to improve the environment around us? Why should, say, a lot of effort go into, say, East Cambs or Huntingdonshire? They make a big effort to make sure that any development on there is to the very highest standard. We put in the best cycle lanes. We ensure that they have more green space. But then other district councils, for some reason, don't. We have to find a sort of working brief. And I guess going back to something I've said earlier on, I have talked about in kind of working the board and the executive that comes together to discuss. It's almost like making sure that, as well as having the leaders of the different councils, having a representative there from public health, and indeed maybe we should be thinking about somebody with a regular role to sit on that committee who can, as we're discussing, taking projects forward and developments, reiterating the point, hitting the leaders hard, saying, why are you not thinking more about how this links up around cycle paths, about the green agenda, improved air quality. So that's kind of where I see it, which is probably very similar to Aidan in other things. To me, it's obvious that we should be doing it. It's what we want. We just have to convince that where there's a prioritization over profit, to ensure, because by building a few more houses, you lose a little bit more green space and all that connectivity that comes with it. We do get, having been on a development management committee in Huntingdonshire, we can push the developers more for CIL payments. We can look at Section 106 payments. We should really be pushing this a lot more and not being scared to say, look, profits will be made on this development. That's economic growth, but let's share the dividends and the benefits to everybody and improve the environment at the same time as providing that important housing. And I should add, particularly social housing.
Thank you. Now, the next question, we've probably, both of you have touched on this, but it's from Neil, who is talking about Fenland. So in Fenland, a rural area, there are hardly any cycle paths, and often these consist of paint that has in many places worn off. And so saying that, starting from a very low base level, and that there's been some progress in that the district council is committing to a strategy document for the area, but it's only a start. So we've talked a bit about why we should have it, but Neil's question is, how do we make these strategies turn into action on the ground, and what can the mayor do to make that happen?
I think that's me, isn't it?
Yep, we go back the other way. Yep.
Well, as somebody who kind of, serves the Fens, from the point of view of much of the community I look after in Huntingdonshire, I recognise that issue and the absolute frustration about there is an element of imbalance around our county. We have a wonderful county. We have the greater Cambridgeshire, the greater Peterborough area, but we have this group in the middle, the Fenland towns, the market towns, and they have been deprived of some of the investment that's required. But we have to convince that the people who live in those areas, that this is something that's going to be the benefit of their towns. And when it comes down to it, it will be about money. And I just think I am a good person to be going to central government. I'm the sort of person who can work cross-party, cooperate to ensure that money that does come from central funds is then put into practice across the whole of the area. I mean, I'm not an expert in how you deliver the best value for money in terms of cycle paths and cycling infrastructure. I would speak to the experts, and I'd have to look at the books to know how much money we've got and where do you get your best investment. But let's be clear, I recognise the problem that Fenland has around rural poverty, and I want to make many of the changes that I want to do in the role as the mayor. It's not just about transport and improved cycle connectivity. It's about addressing those issues, because that in turn improves public health. So it's recognising I am playing to the crowd here in terms of the areas of Fenland, but I recognise that problem. I see it every day in my job.
Aidan, how do we turn strategies into action on the ground?
Yeah, and it is very difficult in Finland, where you've got a lot of road, quite a sort of low density population, and to get that sort of high quality of infrastructure will take a lot of investment. I think it's possibly worth widening out this, thinking about the benefits of this sort of investment. I mean, most fen roads do not have any form of footpath at all anyway. I mean, the walking network in the fens is generally quite limited, particularly restricted by the other forms of infrastructure, the water infrastructure. I think there's an opportunity with the, in particular with the fen biosphere idea, proposal, which is sort of designating the fens and particularly the more ecologically interesting areas of the fens for not so much for protection, but to sort of really emphasise the value of them. I think there's opportunities to put in infrastructure that would work for both visitors as well as people who live there, for both for walking and for cycling, as a sort of good boost to that quality of infrastructure, because at the moment encouraging people to visit the fens, one is somewhat limited by the activities one can do, and if there were better paths, either between villages or alongside roads, I think that would really help. And then we could start to demonstrate the benefits, the way in which people sort of travelling within the fens, not just visitors, are able to use that infrastructure and that sort of developing network.
Okay, we're going to take a bit of a diversion here, and we've got a question that we will most certainly be putting to the Police and Crime Commissioner candidates, but it'll be interesting to see if either of you have a view on this as well, and that is about cycle theft. So Stuart points out that Cambridgeshire's cycle theft problem is rampant, and it is the #1 crime in Cambridge, cycle theft. There's been great work in the community, working to get bikes back to people. Camcycle certainly doing a lot of work in this space as well. But do you see a role for the mayor to help ensure that there are sufficient resources in the community to prevent or deter cycle theft, and ensure repeat offenders in the community are handled appropriately? Now, this might not all be part of your area, but perhaps things about cycle parking or better facilities might fall into your area. Do you think the mayor can play a role in helping to battle cycle theft? Aidan? Yeah,
absolutely, yes. I mean, some of it's more policing. But if we do want to encourage people to use their bikes, we've got to make sure that they've got a sort of a bike to use at the end of the day to cycle home, for example. And that means things about design of spaces, design of buildings and the cycle parking within buildings, and how cycle parking areas can be properly protected. Does have that wider strategic impact, because it's as sort of we I mean, it's a bit controversial, but we're about to spend a large amount of money on extra car parks around the edges of Cambridge, which will have the normal sort of protections you'd expect from to prevent and detect car crime, and we should be considering cycle parking in exactly the same way as a essential part of the infrastructure.
Nick.
I think you've already pointed out that this is very much the remit of a police and crime commissioner to prioritise, cycle theft and the #1 crime in Cambridgeshire. And I can only say on Nikki's behalf, if she was here, that's something I know she's going to focus on. It's absolutely about the end of the ride. We've all, well, not maybe we all have, but I've had that feeling where I've returned at the end of a night shift to then find my bike missing from the hospital, rack, and just feeling, and how it gets to you. It feels a terrible blow, but that's true for any crime committed against you. So it goes back to the infrastructure, making sure it's robust. And let's be clear about it. Possibly there's job opportunities here. If we have enough focus on people using bikes, and there's big enough cycle parks, behind me, as evidenced in places like Holland. If we were being creative, you could maybe have businesses linked to those premises where you would have cycle repair shops. I don't know. You could develop a cycle area where there was a cycle cafe to go to. If they were on cycle routes. If you were creative about it and put a bit of business around it, entrepreneurial, maybe that's the way to go forward. But in essence, it's about being tough on the people who are committing the crimes, but making sure that we're providing the facilities, and once they're created, they are well maintained, because that's the worst thing in the world when you've got you turn up at the end of the night, you've got broken locks that aren't being taken away. There's just a feeling that I'm not going to leave my bike here because it's going to get nicked anyway. It's the old broken window syndrome. If you don't look after the area which is meant to be secure, then a bit by bit, if you leave the broken window, bit by bit, more crime happens. So how we do that, possibly with additional security, but I think you need some very clever business models.
Okay, so we've talked a bit about cycling conditions in the region around maybe Cambridge, but part of what we're seeing coming along are the greenways. So we have a question about the greenways project, which is connecting villages and connecting to each other and connecting villages to Cambridge. But they are taking quite a long time. So Finlay asked, how would you speed up the delivery timescales? It's 3 years to deliver a greenway that only actually takes 2 months to build. Is that really an acceptable timescale? What would you do about it? Nick?
You might get slightly different answers here, because obviously I'm not the person who's currently involved in trying to get them, but I am broadly supportive of them. I actually can see greenways have a place in the transport plans for the future of the Greater Cambridgeshire area. And indeed, just to reiterate, I'd like to see similar sorts of ideas created in the Peterborough metropolitan areas. And why not also be thinking about a wider across Cambridgeshire? How do you speed up the delivery of that sort of project? Well, I guess some of it's about the kind of balance of the costs and convincing people, landowners, people who've got vested interests. I think if people are committed from the start, and you see the leadership, and you're identifying the weak points and the points where things need to be pushed, I'm that person. I'll do it. I really don't have an immediate answer for that. It's maybe, and on this case I might have to defer to Aidan, because he will acknowledge the challenges that has been along the way. I'm not going to stand here and say I bet you any money I could do it quicker than Aidan, but it does need to be speeded up. That would be a great 12 different routes coming out of Cambridge. They've all been agreed. Let's just push on with them, and let's work with all the various agencies along the way, and with the kind of leadership from a mayor who is behind them wholeheartedly. Let's just think it'll happen quicker, and let's be more positive about it. They'll get my support. I'm all for them.
Aidan?
Yes, indeed, it's been really frustrating, and as well as the greenways, as the Chisholm Trail has taken an awfully long time to get down to the point where we are actually constructing it, and some of those issues have been sort of specific issues, yeah, as Nick said, land ownership and particular issues. There's also a sort of issues about the scale of ambition. We have these 12 greenways alongside all of the other things that investment that's going on in cycling. And so I think once we've got over this hump, we need to be more thinking about having an ongoing pipeline of cycling investment, and so that's what, if we are able to have sort of confidence about the level of investment into the future, then we can build this capacity to be able to deliver these schemes as quickly as possible, and also so that we can develop an ongoing pipeline, so that then we're sort of issues can be dealt with earlier on, and it doesn't delay any actual delivery. That's really where we need to be getting to, and I think the greenways is a good boost to that. The absolutely essential thing is that we don't just stop at the end of the 12 greenways. We have to carry on into the future, building on that investment that we've done in the greenways and in the city.
Thank you. Well, it's great to know that we have your support and your intentions to help us get these greenways faster than ever. However, they must also be built to an excellent standard. So our question from Gabriel, who is also representing Milton Cycling Campaign, is will you commit that to cycling infrastructure meeting the latest government guidance, which is Local Transport Note 1/20. So Aidan, tell us, what standard of cycling infrastructure would you deliver for the region?
Yes, absolutely. So that new cycling guidance is now clear government cycling guidance. So that makes it sort of much easier to be able to then to hold people to that, both developers and different other bodies that are delivering infrastructure. If we want to do go beyond that, I think it does need that sort of consensus and agreement, either with government or at a sort of regional level, at which the mayor would have a crucial role in that. So I think that new guidance is really positive. It does have a lot of stuff. I mean, you've been using it well to hold developers to account, in particular Highways England to account, so it's not just a matter of one person saying I want more, because you're not going to be able to get people to accept it, because without that sort of stronger policy in place. I think there were policy opportunities with the combined authorities local transport plan, and also the local plans that are at various stages. I think we've a good moment with the Greater Cambridge one to be able to get some standards in there, that then we will be able to force developers and other organisations to follow those standards.
Nick.
Thank you. To answer this sort of question, I often sort of refer back to the day job and think a bit like a doctor. You know, the truth is, when you've got a problem and you want to solve it, you know, and particularly in medicine, you know, you can throw an awful lot of money, you can use all the expensive treatments, but actually you can't always afford them. They're not always available, and you just have to, you know, understand what will get the job done. Now, I'm always also very wary of, you know, when in any sort of hustings events, and I believe you me, I've never had so many requests to commit to things over the course of the last month. I absolutely want to see high quality cycling infrastructure, but it's very difficult for me to commit to the measures that you've already mentioned, because I've actually never read them. So I think I would be foolish to say, yeah, we're definitely going to do them. I want to see the infrastructure, but I wanted to see the absolute safe, well-designed and actually delivered. So when it comes down to it, I'm potentially 5 weeks away from being the mayor of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, but I'm a mayor who will be committed to making sure that greenways are delivered. But are they going to be to the absolute highest standard that is currently referred to? Well, I'd have to look at those figures, and I'd also have to look at the final costing of how much we've got to take, because I want to make sure the model of cycling is distributed not just to ensure that all the residents of Milton get the best cycle route possible into the centre of Cambridge, but I also want to be thinking about people who've never taken up cycling, who live in Dogsthorpe, in Peterborough. You know, you're thinking about the development of infrastructure in the Fen. So we've got to be balanced about it. So I'm not going to sit here and promise things that I know I'm unsure I can't deliver, but you have my word on that. I will be looking to make sure that they are safe, they are user friendly, that they are accessible. We're trying to get everybody in society, from the lowest socio-economic groups to the ones who've got the most money. We want to deliver cycling, but it will have to be done in a practical way based on the costs at the time. And I'm looking forward to taking that role on.
Okay, well, that's it sends us right into the next question. So to get more people cycling and walking, it's not always about building cycle lanes. It's often about thinking about our road hierarchy and using what we have. So we've seen through the pandemic the use of filters. So some strategically placed planters can create safe routes on those quieter streets. The big problem that we have, which affects active travel, but also affects our health, our well-being, and the environment, is the amount of car traffic that we have coming into our cities and our regional hubs. So what are your plans to reduce car traffic and air pollution caused by cars? That question comes from Sarah. So Nick, tell us, how should we reduce car traffic and how do we do it?
Well, that's what Grant Shapps says, and he's on the other side. So I'm agreeing with the Conservatives here. Now, look, we're meant to be developing plans to cut the note of kind of car use by 50% by 2030. But we've got to do it where they're popping. We've got to take the communities with us. So my argument has been, and I've already declared it, is that I've mentioned it already, we need to look at how we configure public transport. If we can convince people to be either get onto bikes, take up walking, design services, and particularly uses the buses route, which are providing regular, frequent services from some of the areas that currently don't have any bus services at all, we can take cars off the street. And it's an absolute imperative. You're absolutely right. We do need to look at how the pollution caused by that. And let's be clear, I'm not talking about 1970s belching diesel, gas guzzling double deckers. We're looking at, user-friendly, low emission, green, ideally electric buses that we can think about how they're going to work in short journeys to deliver that kind of reduced traffic in the cities. And there's benefits to that. That's a green economy. There's jobs in it, creating charging points, having people who are skilled, just getting the bus drivers. These are the sort of things that we can look towards and have an absolute shift in the way that we think about how our cities should run. So let's see lots of kind of same colour buses, all under the control of the combined authority, providing support to communities, both in cities and out with them in the shires. And then hopefully that we'll get the cars off the road. And then we can look at the other things, which I know are contentious. And let's be clear, it's down to local communities to decide where they want their, car-free areas. But I would make a big push purely on the grounds of, safety, about safe streets around schools. And I think there may be something I arguably as a mayor who's a paediatrician, very big on child health, and wanting to avoid trauma to children. Let's just think about how we can avoid the traffic around school time and think about how we can work with the, the communities to try and get people working with education and schools to try and make sure that is something that can be delivered. And just as one final reminder, I have this plan about the buses, and I've said it before. So the thing is, I see the image of a Fen Tiger bus. We have a livery, which is the orange of the setting sun on the fens, the black loamy soil. We have sort of orange and black Fen Tiger buses that spread across the whole of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and they are providing regular services. I'd missed that one out, but that's my vision.
Okay, Aidan, traffic reduction. What are your thoughts?
Yep, it is absolutely fundamental, and not just for cycling, but for our climate change ambitions. I think if we, regardless of the sort of mode of driving cars, whether it's diesel or electric, we do need less cars on the road. Also, as we've seen, the economic impact of congestion is going to start really hitting the economy, especially of the Cambridge area. Yeah, the most fundamental thing about cars is the way that they damage sort of public spaces for the people who might want to use them, and that's particularly acute in city centres. So reducing the space for cars and giving it over to not just cycling, but also public transport and also other civic uses will just make our places better. At the Citizens Assembly that the GCP ran, how long ago? 18 months ago, wasn't it? A little bit over. The sort of headline on that was about closing roads, but actually what it was really about was reallocating space away from cars to other forms of transport that have less negative impacts, and so I think we can see there that with the right approach, with the right engagement, people do understand the benefits of changing the ways our spaces work, and in particular urban areas. It is absolutely vital to consider the other impacts, especially on people who are dependent on cars for whatever reason. Often that's for disability, but also often it's because they just don't happen to live in areas that are well served by public transport, and often that is the lowest paid people who have to travel the furthest, and who aren't able to afford housing in areas that do have good trains, for example. So when we're planning this and obviously the Greater Cambridge Partnership has done an awful lot of planning on this over the last couple of years. As we're planning this, the sort of equality impact of this is really important, so that we are confident that we're able to provide the alternatives. And there's also the issue around, particularly in relation to cars, in relation to the incentives for cars. It's so many cases it's just cheaper and easier to drive a car, and that whole equation needs to be changed. So that's quite a big question, but we're sort of got the particular opportunity in Cambridge and Greater Cambridge and to an extent in Peterborough as well, which has some really good cycling infrastructure, to be able to think about how bikes can be part of that mix of changing the way that transport works.
Thank you. Right, so we're going to do these following questions a little bit quicker if we can, because I think we've explored a lot of the issues, but here are some of maybe the more specifics. So the first one is school streets, and you'll note I've taken us maybe from the region into more developed areas. So now we're getting to the nitty-gritty. School streets, can the combined authority fund them, support them? Would you, as mayor, support more school streets across the whole region? Aidan?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, but really interesting idea, and does emphasise the who is going to benefit from this. I mean, it's about making children's lives safer, more pleasant, enabling them to walk and cycle to school. The combined authority has got a particular role in setting the strategies on this through the local transport plan, and then supporting sort of including that where possible in other investments we're doing, and then working with the county council and district councils on this, and I think there's definitely a role for some leadership on this.
Nick?
I think it goes without saying, as a children's doctor, I'll be looking for improvements in public health, and particularly in the lives of children on the way to school, protecting them from potential dangers, and the idea of safe journeys between school and home. If that's the basic premise of the school streets thing, I'm very much as supportive of it. Likewise, I can see a real benefit of sort of some of the areas we talk about 20-mile-per-hour zones, extending that idea further afield. But I don't really have much. To me, it makes sense. It's just we have to convince people, because for some reason people don't always want to see those ideas as an immediate benefit to the greater good, and I do, so I support them.
Thank you. Now to a scheme that's recently been introduced, e-scooters and the dockless e-bikes. There have been some concerns about issues with people with visual impairments, perhaps tripping over them, they're blocking the pavements, but also are they providing additional mobility? So what are your thoughts on e-scooters, e-bikes, and would you support these were you elected? Quick answers, please. Nick.
In all honesty, I've not been very impressed with how they've been introduced, and I don't think there's been enough. The idea has some legs, but I would much rather see the money that was being spent in actually getting more e-bikes rather than e-scooters. I think they're not necessarily the answer. I would rather see money spent on developing more e-bikes and pushing that idea, not just obviously in the current cities of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. I've got some ideas where I'd like to see and work with the companies looking around sponsorship deals. Look, hey, they famously became known as Boris bikes. That was a Mayor Johnson who introduced Boris bikes. Well, how about this Mayor Johnson introduces Dr Nik's bikes, but we put them further afield over the whole of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. So I'd focus on them more than the scooters.
Aidan.
I mean, electric scooters are here to stay. We've got to work out how they actually how they fit in with the roads, but they're here to stay. They will have a role in transport. I can't imagine they're ever going to have a really significant role. As far as I know, the problems there haven't been any very serious problems that I've heard of in Cambridge, but I've seen in other places pre-pandemic, in other cities where they've become quite a serious problem of causing problems for people with mobility issues and generally cluttering the space. We've really got to avoid that. It seems like an experiment worth doing. It's not a particular priority that I have.
Thank you. I think we've got about 10 more minutes of questions, so we're all good to keep going for that 10 minutes. Yep.
Yeah, bring it on.
Excellent. So we've talked about some of the things that you might do. We have a question from Martin, which is about the governance structures. So from Martin, what is your view on the current local government structure, district councils, the county, the GCP, the mayoral authority? This is why I'm so busy, I deal with them all. And what would you push to change, if anything? And many people have commented for a while now that there is a lack of joined up thinking, which particularly impedes transport improvements. So Nick, from your, I think we've gone the right, no, Aidan, we're up to you this time. What is your view on that messy structure? What can be done, and what would you do?
It is a mess. I think the problems are only partly to do with the messy structure. The problems are also to do with just the way it happens, that the politics works in Cambridgeshire, where it's sort of so starkly divided, and there's always been a quite sense in Cambridge that people in Cambridge are not completely in control of what's happening in the area, and that's the problem. It's sort of a distance and a failure of democracy to properly make people feel like they're participating in decisions that are happening to them. So that there will need to be some form of change, hopefully sooner rather than later. These things seem to mainly happen on the whim of governments. but I'd certainly support some changes that do improve that connection with people, with residents, and giving people a sense that they're able to decide on what happens to them, and that's both the GCP when it was formed originally and then the combined authority have gone in the wrong direction. There was some things we can do in the short term to overcome that. Being more engaged, being more communicative, being more transparent, that the current mayor just simply fails to do. But that's the very short-term issue.
Nick.
Hi, yeah. So in regard to whole-scale change, organisational change, well, having worked in the NHS for the best part of 30-odd years, I've seen various formats of clinical commissioning groups, private, primary care trusts. The one thing I don't want to do is suggest we must keep changing things. There are aspects of local government which could be done better, I'm sure, but I haven't immediately got the answer, and I'm not proposing any significant change to the current layers that we've got. To be clear, I am supportive. I mean, I'm standing to be the mayor because I think if the job was done well with good leadership and those 3 C's, the compassion, the cooperation and the community, maybe we could move past this impasse where there's this tribalism. And okay, we'll always have the process of going to local elections, but I do think there is room for much more improved cooperation rather than the sort of the bun fights that we've had over the last 4 years. And I recognise in principle devolution is our taxes paid to central government coming back to local representation to deliver local solutions. I might not have been born around the local area, but I'm invested, with my kids in schools here, with a job that in the local hospitals. I want to see the very best. And I actually think somebody like myself, local people making decisions about the use of money to improve transport networks, to improve housing, that should work. But, let's be clear, it hasn't been going well. So let's change some of the personnel, bring in people who are actually saying at the start of it, I want to work with you. It doesn't matter if you're Liberal, it doesn't matter if you're Conservative. I'm Labour, I'll work with everybody and I'll work across all organisations. I've been doing it in my job for years. I've worked with education, I've worked with social care. I understand the boundaries and restrictions of, and more recently, obviously working within local government. So give us a chance and we'll have a go at it. Maybe it can be worked. And let's have the money, which we've been promised from central government, and make sure it's spent correctly, but working together.
Thank you. Now to, I guess, another more general question. We've had a few questions pop up about climate change and the role of transport in that. So I'm going to use the one written by our very own Anna, which is that the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Independent Commission on Climate recently calculated that if we continue with business as usual, the region will exceed its carbon budget within just 6 years. What would you do in your first year of office to fast track action on transport and set us on the right path towards fending off climate change? Nick.
I'm not sure. Probably there's a lot of what I've already said. I mean, I would reiterate the point about the dream of a transport hub based in the Fen with the Fenland Tigers. That it's buses. In terms of that's a quick action that can be taken, and we can look towards how we can move people away from the cars and the reliance on that into better public transport. I mean, I absolutely recognise the green agenda, and as somebody who was involved in the Labour Party's putting on the new Green Deal, I was very supportive of. So it's there, we have to deal with it. The only other observation I would make, at the start of my getting involved, at the very start of the year, I was invited along to a fascinating talk about the issue of the chalk aquifer and water resources within the south of the area. And for me personally, we've seen huge development. Cambridge as a city and Greater Cambridgeshire sucks in a huge amount of development, and it gives back a lot. It gives a lot value, but we have to redistribute the benefits that we see across the whole of the county. So in terms of the green agenda, yes, we've got to have growth, we've got to have the right type of growth, but it won't be business as usual. We've got to look at how we bring in the benefits to all. That includes Peterborough, that includes Wisbech, that includes March, and the successes of the lower part of the county and the money that's generated by growth, we have to be really, really thinking how we redistribute it. And I think that's part of the green agenda, because I think the overdevelopment in so many areas, particularly in the south of the area, is of course a concern. And sometimes you just have to say, stop, let's rethink this.
Aidan.
Yeah, so one of the suggestions is I'll absolutely be advocating this, is to develop a very clear plan for meeting those targets that are both contained in the report and also the more broader targets about meeting getting to zero carbon by 2050, if not sooner. So we don't currently have that a clear and detailed plan with stages to get there. So we need to do that straight away, and then we'll see exactly what the contributions of changes to transport will make. I mean, as you said in the Climate Commission report, transport is clearly a very large part of our climate emissions, and also work on the Greater Cambridge Local Plan has shown that where we choose to put new development has a huge impact on the carbon emissions of housing, and that is mainly through transport. We've got through over an hour of discussion about transport in Cambridge without mentioning tunnels, I believe. So one of the first things, or maybe one of the first things I would do is stop the plan to build tunnels in 10 or 15 years time, which is well beyond that 6-year limit that you were talking about. It just isn't going to bring the change that we need, because we need that change now. So in addition to the sort of more general reform of buses that Nick's talking about, which I entirely agree with, we need there are some issues particularly in the urban areas, and Cambridge more acutely, I think, than Peterborough, of getting some much more high quality public transport, so that people can get into and through those urban areas, and that can be done, I'm quite convinced, much more quickly than 10-15 years if you don't do tunnels and invent autonomous vehicles that don't yet exist to do it.
That was my very next question. So what we're going to do is have a very quick answer, very quick soundbite, if you like, which touches on a few of the questions we've had. Very clearly, do you support the current proposals for the Cam Metro? And if not, what is your proposal? Very short, what's your alternative? So Aidan.
Well, insofar as we know what the proposals for the Cam Metro are, no, I don't. I think hugely expensive tunnels, hugely risky tunnels are wrong. We just can't have confidence in designing a system around autonomy. We do need something high quality that is realistic, can be delivered quickly and in stages, so that we can get those changes done quickly.
Nick.
In simple terms, no, I do not support Mayor Palmer's plans for a Cam Metro. I would need to now, hopefully being successful and being the new leader, I would then look at what all the other options that are on the table, and then we'd have to start thinking, cost benefits. But we have to keep remembering we want something that's deliverable and quick, and that's why I reiterate the issue around the regulated buses and as an immediate kind of answer, and then all other options would need to be considered. But no, I do not support Mayor Palmer's Cam Metro system.
Thank you. Right, we are getting to the point of wrapping up. So we'll give you a chance to make any final comments that you would like to make, but I think we've got a great question that's come through from one of our members, Simon, which is, the current mayor has got people talking about Cam Metro, Soham Station and the Wisbech branch line. What ideas would the people of Cambridgeshire be talking about if you were the mayor? Nick.
Well, if anybody wants to tweet it, Fenland Tigers, that's what I'll be talking about. I want to really talk about buses. That's what I'm going to be focusing on in the early stages. The idea that a whole community across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough will have a sense of joint identity based on, as I say, the idea of the Fenland Tiger, a bus system that connects people. And as we then take forward, we look at the resources that we have, look at the funding that we have from central government, and then really work on the connectivity. So that's my immediate thing. I could talk about the benefits, and I would like to see Wisbech rail extension. I would push for that. We need to be very mindful. We need to have the East-West rail link, making head roads across the whole of our county and linking up the East Coast and the West. That's part of a bigger picture for the whole of the United Kingdom. But if there was one take-home message, 3 buses in the Fenland Tiger.
Aidan, what would be the big ideas that we'd be talking about if you were the mayor?
Yeah, broadly a sustainable transport revolution, really. I think there's an opportunity there now. And the things you listed that Palmer have done are sort of rail and public transport, but the truth is he's much more interested in roads and not less sustainable schemes, and there's no sort of weight or momentum or behind the plans for more sustainable travel. So it's that a broad sustainable travel transport revolution with cycling really at the heart of it in much of the area.
Thank you. Excellent. Well, I'll just say that we've had lots of thank yous to both of you for the questions that you have answered. There was even the suggestion that you should run on a joint ticket. I'll let you talk about that one later.
Can I just point out, I'm going to be magnanimous here. Look, there are obviously things that me and Aidan agree with, but there's also things we disagree with. There's just a reminder to everybody is that there are 2 options. You know, you can put your primary choice, that's down to you, but everybody has a second choice. And I would encourage people to use their second choice wisely. It's an extension of democracy. And I think that's a very good idea, which if it went in the right direction, well, maybe one of us will win. And I think that would be better than the current incumbent. So I will doff my hat to all those, but remember you have 2 votes. It's just your choice to choose which ones you put them in order.
Absolutely, going to say the same thing. Yeah, well worth remembering that.
Excellent. Right. Well, I will hand over to both of you for final comments, and I guess I'll just drop a few hints there. Really big issues that I think are important to all of us, and more so than ever after the recent experiences, is health, dealing with climate change, creating better places for us to live and explore in our local community, and recovering from the pandemic and supporting a thriving economy. I think these are big themes that are coming out right now. So having dropped those hints, I shall now pass over to both of you just to make any final comments that you would like to our wonderful attendees this evening. I've forgotten our order, so I'm just going to say, Aidan, what would you like to say before we close?
Yeah, well, yes, you've either done the pitch for us, haven't you? Yeah, we've got the mayor has quite significant powers in tackling climate change, creating better places, improving housing, doing something about inequality, both within Cambridge and within across Cambridgeshire. And transport's a fundamental part of that. I think we will achieve sort of the most we can by working with our communities, and in particular community groups like Camcycle, which is an extraordinary organisation. You do amazing work, and you, in a sense, keep the politicians honest, and so it's that sort of synergy, I think, really gives a weight to the ambition that we should be having now. Yeah.
Nick.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you to you, Camcycle, for organising, giving me the opportunity to speak to a wider audience. Thank you to all those people who've tuned in for 5 minutes or for the whole event. I salute you. It's using up your evening to listen to politicians or would-be politicians is always a bit of a chore. But I'd like to finish with really how I started. The way I've approached my campaign, and it will be also with transport, it will be with housing, it will be with all aspects of the combined authority role, it's those 3 C's. I'm taking compassion, cooperation, and community. So that's 3. And then I need the 4th of change, which is the vote. But I do thank you for, I've now got a full hand. The 5th one's cycling. So I'll put cycling in there as well. I've got 5 C's now. And I'll go on to my, yeah. So thank you for your time. And that's how I see the world. And that's how I like to see going forward.
Excellent. Well, I would just say thank you to both of you for joining us this evening and for being very straightforward and letting us know straight away that you would be here. We really appreciate that you've made that commitment and you've made that time to speak to Camcycle and the over 40 people we've consistently had through the duration of this hustings, and there will be hundreds more that will tune in over the coming weeks. So thank you so much for sharing your views. And I guess I wish all candidates equally good luck.
Thank you, Roxanne. Okay.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And we'll see you at our meeting next month, which is actually all about e-scooters. So Voy will be joining us. And I've ensured we get someone with great technical expertise to really talk to us about what's going on with these e-scooters popping up around Cambridge. So we'll see you all in May. Thanks, everyone. Bye.